Welcome to another edition of Trucking on Route 66 in Missouri Oral History Project, a collaborative initiative between the Missouri State University Libraries and OzarksAlive.com. My name is Tom Peters. I'm Dean of Library Services at Missouri State University. My colleague on this oral history project is Caitlin McConnell from OzarksAlive.com. This project is made possible in part by a grant from the Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program of the National Park Service. Today's date is Monday, June 4th, 2018. We are in Independence, Missouri this fine evening at the Midwest Genealogy Center. Our guest today is Bill Crow. Bill, thanks for meeting with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'll start with a tough question. Where and when were you born?
The where is Sioux City, Iowa.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm an Iowa boy.
There you go. The when was April of 1948.
48, okay. So you were born just after the war.
Right, part of the front end of the baby boom.
You were the leading edge, the cutting edge of the baby boom generation. And then you got into trucking.
Well, I didn't go from being born in Sioux City and then I got into trucking.
How'd you get from being born in Sioux City to get into trucking?
That'd be too long a story, but 36 years later, I was hired in Reno, Nevada by what was then known as Yellow Freight.
Okay.
As a sales representative for him in northern Nevada.
So you were 36 years old when you got into the business, so to speak. You want to say anything about the formative years, the first 36?
Well, I'd be happy to. We were born in Sioux City, moved to Des Moines after the war. My dad got out of the service, spent a couple years there. He went back in the service. We went back to Sioux City. Well, he went to Korea. He came back. We went to Rapid City, South Dakota, back to Sioux City, Sacramento, California, England, a couple locations there, London and Oxford, back to California, then Montana, a little place called Glasgow, Montana that I just saw a story on, has been called the absolute middle of nowhere in America because of its location, furthest away from any town of 75,000 or more people.
Really?
Yeah.
It's the farthest place in the contiguous 48.
In the contiguous 48 that is...
for a town of 75,000.
Yeah. It doesn't take much to go to a town of 75,000, but it does for the folks in Montana. So.
Yeah, so I'm now wondering, what's the town of 75,000?
Well, Billings,
Billings.
Great Falls, Helena, I'm going back to California, St. Helena. And from there to Denver, joined the service, went overseas in the 60s, spent a couple tours in Vietnam, went and spent a year at the South Pole with the Seabees, supporting the National Science Foundation.
Yeah.
Came back to Sacramento.
Really? Okay.
So,
and then, so when you were 36 years old, you got involved in Yellow Freight. So what year was that? I'm trying to do 48.
1985.
85. So you were with Yellow Freight for
31 years.
31 years.
To the day, yeah.
Really, to the day. So you retired in 2016?
68.
68. Yeah. Oh, 68.
I was 68, almost 68 when I retired.
Okay.
Month off.
But you worked with Yellow Freight
31 years.
31 years.
Yeah.
From 85 to 2016. Is that 31 years?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Well done. Yeah. You're not a math guy. You did that well.
No. Librarian. So 85 was kind of the end of the Route 66 era. It was also the time of deregulation. So you were in sales?
I was in sales.
All right.
Absolutely.
And Yellow Freight, the little I've been able to read about Yellow Freight was it started in Oklahoma City.
That's correct.
And there were some brothers there. The Harrell brothers?
The Harrells.
And they started off with like cabs and buses.
Yellow Cab, that's where the name Yellow came from.
Yeah. And then one brother took on the cab business, and the other one took on the trucking.
Took the trucks.
Yeah. And so Yellow Freight eventually became what's known today as YRC.
YRC Freight.
YRC Freight.
A division of YRC Worldwide that owns 4 different divisions. YRC
Yeah.
Freight, New Penn in New England, Holland in the Midwest, they're truly Midwestern, and Redaway out on the west. And then up in Canada, we have YRC Freight of Canada, and it came along with our purchase of Roadway, and it was
Yeah.
Reimer up there.
Right, Reimer
So,
trucking.
and then we have a contractual operation going down in Mexico.
So YRC Freight has become a large freight company.
Just about $5 billion a year.
Okay.
It was just about $10 billion a year in 2007.
So the Great Recession.
Oh, just decimated trucking generally.
Yeah.
Tonnage dropped by 30%
Really?
in the nation.
Wow.
Capacity is unused capacity is the highest expense you have in trucking.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, everybody had way too much capacity, and we had not put Roadway and Yellow together yet,
Yeah.
and we really had a lot of extra capacity. So
Yeah.
we had to slam them together
Yeah.
and try to take capacity out. We were also, well, you can read the headlines for about 5 years as we weren't going to survive.
Yeah. You were losing money big time.
We were losing money left and right. We had too much capacity. We had massive amounts of debt, so we were eating cash left and right. We had one point. Let me think of that debt load. It was like 1.4 billion, so we're way over leveraged in our purchase of those regional operating companies.
Yeah.
I obviously did a lot more for the company than being a sales rep in Reno. I had a career that
Yeah.
bounced me around, but I ended up on the executive team at the end of my career. So,
Yeah. But you started off in sales.
yeah, sales guy in Reno.
Sales was your first love, and you enjoyed it.
That's the best job I had in the company. It's like you had no one working for you. Had your own little business. Most of your competitors are more interested in eating lunch and playing golf than taking care of their customers, so that was
Really?
pretty easy.
Really?
Yeah, the company really went through some tough times till James Welch came back, and Bill Zellers was left the company property.
Yeah.
And James did a great job putting the company back together. Leverage ratios back down to like 3.2. The debts, you didn't try to pay off all the debt, just restructure the debt over several years.
Yeah.
But the company's in good shape now, second
Survived.
largest,
Survived. Yeah.
survived and moving on the way to thrive.
Yeah. It's the second largest in the nation. Huh?
Yeah, FedEx Freight's the biggest.
Yeah.
And they weren't even around when I started.
Yeah. So back in the 80s, mid-80s, that was the era of deregulation, right?
Yeah, 1980 was the year. And we had the toughest time as an industry. We were almost completely unionized at the time. 90% union. Don't hold me to that, but
Roughly 90.
90%. Most truck drivers were union guys, Teamsters. And the deregulation impacted that in a way, probably in a big way. The first thing that was impacted was the price you pay, because the regulation was we had authority to run certain
Right.
lines,
Right.
lanes,
Right.
and the company wrote off tens of millions of dollars when that deregulation bill was signed off the balance sheet because authority was worth money.
Yeah.
But the carriers, sort of like a public utility, right? We were regulated.
Right.
Profits were guaranteed by the rate boards.
Right.
The companies all get together once a year.
You couldn't undercut anybody. There's no
You
incentive to
couldn't
undercut.
break, you couldn't break a rate. You couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So you had building collusion, if you will,
Yeah.
and you had protection of your territory. That all went away.
Yeah.
And
And why was it just the era of deregulation and?
I think it was that it would be, and it turned out it was better for the consuming public, better for the general welfare of the company, that this was not a way that America should run. It should be the strongest survive
Right.
and prosper. And quite honestly, it lowered rates dramatically. Companies could still make plenty of money. We learned how to do that, and we were able to. It was a great era of expansion for Yellow Freight.
Yeah.
It had grown way beyond Oklahoma and the Midwest.
Yeah.
but still there was room to go anywhere you wanted to go. And we ended up covering all of Canada, all the continuous states, had a place in Hawaii, had a place in Alaska, served Puerto Rico. You just go anywhere.
Yeah.
And there was the company got into financial trouble in the early 50s. The Herald still owned it.
Oh, yeah.
So it was on the auction block, and a group of bankers bought it, and that's where the Powells, I don't know if you...
Oh, yeah. Powell's.
Yeah, George Sr. was a banker, and he
So that was
came
in
in.
the 50s.
That's how it got to Kansas.
Yeah, my sense of the trucking industry is it's always been kind of, feast or famine, and companies get, during the era of regulation, that's how you grew, was by acquiring other companies and their
authority.
Their authority, yeah. So.
Yeah, that when I first came to the company, it was so fresh. The guys were still talking about, well, I worked for Western Gillette and Yellow Lotus to get into California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were kind of like the young whippersnapper that never knew the era of regulated routes and stuff. Mm-hmm. So Yellow made a name for itself as an LTL carrier, less than load.
Right, and was able to build that network because of deregulation.
Yeah. So as a salesman, what did you do as a salesman?
That's a great question, because I've been working in retail, running a small group of specialty stores in Northern California and Nevada, and it was family owned, and the couple that owned it needed to close it down and retire. Yeah. And so I went out looking for work, and they were very supportive of that. And I was in Rotary and the Chamber and all that. So I went to a Rotarian buddy who, in Carson City, Nevada, ran the Jockey men's underwear warehouse, distribution center, and he was there to ship into California. Yeah. And he said, well, you'd be great selling for one of these trucking companies. And I said, what the hell do you sell for a trucking company? So I've learned a lot, but it's simply this. You are there to supply capacity to supply chains. And you have to supply the most efficient, cost-effective capacity you possibly can to be it an inbound retailer like a Walmart, or to an outbound shipper like a 3M. Yeah. Just a couple examples.
So everybody's looking for shipping, basically.
They're looking for capacity, and they're looking to have their supply chains well taken care of at the best possible price. Yeah. So a salesperson go around and make those deals, including now, because of deregulation, the negotiation of rates. Yeah. Now, they didn't give an open checkbook to sales. That would not be smart.
Yeah. So you'd have like your rate sheets and stuff. And,
we would have you'd have the rates, just the gross rates. This is our race base, but people knew you could now discount. Yeah. So they'd want to have a discount. Yeah. So the first carrier to discount was Yellow, and that happened even before I got there. Yeah. And they did it to get utilization and capacity, and they called it Yellow Effect Savings. If you give us 5 shipments, you can have 12% off.
You commit to 5 shipments.
5 shipments a day.
A day.
Day at pickup, because it's very, the capacity of your P&D, pickup and delivery drivers, is very important too. Right. So there's a real cost effectiveness to pulling into a dock and picking up more than 1 shipment. Yeah. So on the average in the industry is probably 1.8 shipments per pickup. So to get 5 out of somebody really had some value.
Something, okay. And when you talk about unused capacity is the bane of the industry. I mean, that ripples through the whole industry. I mean, if you're running empty anywhere, that's bad, right?
That's real bad.
Or if you're running less than full,
real bad.
That's not good. Yeah. So how did you do that? So 85, when did computers sort of come into the industry in a big way? I mean, how did you know? Or were you just looking for the sale and then you'd figure out the logistics of it?
No,
or did somebody else figure out the logistics?
That's a great question, but these weren't around in 85, but mainframes were. Yeah. And the whole basement of our Overland Park headquarters was a huge IBM computer holding
so let me back up for a second. So when the Powells acquired the Yellow Freight, they relocated it to
Kansas City.
Overland Park.
No, actually, they were in Kansas City on state line.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, they
on the
moved.
Missouri side or the?
Yeah, I think it was on the Missouri side. I wasn't here.
Yeah.
I was in third grade in Des Moines.
You weren't in tune with what was happening.
Now, I know somebody who knows all those facts, who is not older than I, but a lot of the people come into our industry is unique in that most people don't know about it. And I found out about it because my buddy had the underwear warehouse, right?
Right.
Most of the people come in because they've got somebody in the family that knows the industry. And back in the day, there's endless stories from guys that went through college, they're going out looking for work, and their buddies are all going to be accountants and marketing guys.
Yeah.
And they go and they're a dock supervisor, knowing they'll have a career at Yellow Freight or at Roadway. You got to know those people. The story's the same with both companies. And they were immediately making 30 or 40% more than their friends that went into their profession.
Those college educated people, yeah.
Well, and obviously you need a college education to advance in management at Yellow Freight. It's just an unknown industry, but because of that unionized workforce, their rates of pay were so high, the management rates of pay were pretty good.
Yeah.
Like I retired 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
One of the few guys walking around with defined pension program check coming in every month.
Yeah.
You know, my friends are like, how'd you get that? Trucking guy.
I know.
That or the public sector, you're not going to get them.
Yeah. So you go to either a supplier or basically a retail place and just say, how would you?
Well, you sit down and talk about your transportation,
what their needs
your
are.
supply chain needs.
Yeah.
How do you run your business? What are your needs? How do you look at your inventory, the turnover ratios? How quickly do you need to, as money, especially back in the late 70s into the 80s, inventory costs were a lot more than the cost of freight.
Yeah.
Because we were up to about 20% prime back in those days.
Yeah. Yeah, I was I graduated in '80, and I went to work for a small startup company in Iowa City. It was wholesale foods. Mm-hmm. And the things they loved to sell were things where you could, usually back then you would get 2% off if paid within 30 days of getting that invoice. So you'd buy something, whatever, less than load, 3 pallets of whole kernel corn or whatever. And then if you could sell it quickly and get payment from the restaurants before you had to make the payment for the corn, you were just turning it around. The faster you could turn that stuff over, the better your profit margin would be.
Absolutely.
So all those companies were trying to do that. I'm guessing during the 30 years of your career, all that supply chain stuff has just totally tightened up now. They're just like, I want to get it at 10 a.m. on Tuesday,
Well, it has, and with data, it's easier and easier to understand how to optimize your supply chain.
Yeah.
From the ship dates you give your providers, to the carrier you select to move it, to the windows you give the carriers to deliver the shipments in, to the penalties you get for using the wrong carriers.
Right. So back in the 80s, though, this was you had mainframes, but so how did you sell? Would you sort of make the sale and then figure out how to meet their needs, or?
No, you'd first figure out what their needs were and see if their needs dovetailed in with your abilities.
Yeah.
So once you understood, and in those days, even though we were deregulated and could go anywhere we want, we saw ourselves as purely a long haul carrier. So
long haul, less than load.
Long haul, less than truckload.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had service maps, and we still have them today. You can go on the website and you can see here's a YRC Freight, and there are little dots all over the map where there are terminals.
Right.
And it's the entirety of North America, Mexico through Canada.
Yeah.
And my service map, I was in Reno, didn't start showing a service point until Denver. We didn't solicit anything that went up and down the West Coast. too short a haul, if that makes sense. Because we ran a hub and spoke network
Right,
to consult, just like the airlines do today.
right.
You know, when you fly, you don't get to fly out of Springfield.
So you wanted to ship something in Denver at the least?
Denver would be the shortest length of haul.
Yeah,
And the longer the length of haul, the more money you made per hundredweight, because the rates are based on weight, the classification, and that's a whole strange
yeah,
animal,
yeah.
and the distance.
Yeah, so just for listeners, classification was like everything that's shippable has a classification.
It does.
And is like one considered average or something, or, is it?
Actually, it goes 50, 55, 60, 65, 77 and a half is in there, 92 and a half. Then
Yeah, this is back from the old regulation days.
It goes all the way back to the railroads.
Yeah,
And the book, the National Motor Classification book, is probably as thick as, remember telephone directories? No.
yeah.
So,
Remember those? For Des Moines or?
exactly. This is more like Manhattan. And then there are abilities to bring new products on the market, and then there's a committee, the National Classification
Still to
Committee,
this day?
to this day.
So, I don't know, if I were, let's see, what's the new product that's come on in the last, Chromebooks.
Mhm.
You gotta ship 2 pallets of Chromebooks. There's a classification for those.
Mhm. Data processing, it come under the major heading data processing
Yeah,
equipment, and then there'd be about 40 pages of
yeah,
different descriptions, because the elements that go into a classification are, number one and most important to the carrier is what's its density.
yeah.
Number two, what's its value? Because carriers are in the insurance business. They shouldn't be, but they are.
Yeah.
You know,
Density, value.
Density
is
and
like,
value. Density is how much weight per cubic foot.
Right, how many wireless mice are in a box, and how many boxes are on a pallet.
And how much room you're gonna
how
use
much
on my
room-
truck.
How many, what's the, yeah,
So to put it in, just compare ball bearings to ping pong balls.
yeah,
Best density, worst density.
right,
So how much room you can use on a trailer? Then loadability. How is it configured? And then how is it packaged? Is the rules of packaging are also in that classification.
yeah,
So
really. So it's a pretty complex system, but
very complex.
eventually you can get down to say, okay, you want to ship this. I remember when I was in the food service, Dart cups, all styrofoam back then in the 80s. You could fill a truck full of styrofoam cups, and you still have to worry about high winds,
Absolutely.
There's no weight there, very little weight. So, it was all about maximizing. They'd have the big, they'd get the ones that are real tall trailers, because they just want to get as much on there because it doesn't weigh anything.
Well, you find with industries like that, like injected molded plastic, styrofoam, they tend to have little manufacturing facilities all over the place, close to their customers. They have to.
Yeah.
Because the cost of transportation is outrageous.
So what all did Yellow Freight, did they just do, stuff that fit on a typical trailer, or did you do flatbed stuff, or no refrigerated? Did you do any refrigerated? No, just dry
box
stuff.
Yep.
That's all you did, less than truckload.
We'd sell the utilization of our equipment as truckload rates to cover empty miles. So to give you an example, while it's been characterized as a rust belt, the Midwest, it's not. It was still, with the exception of some of the big ports where imports are coming in.
Right.
The flow of freight from the Midwest to the coast is just phenomenal.
It's still.
Here's where we're making everything, here's where all the people are.
Yeah.
So you load these trucks up and you get them out to California, and there's nothing to bring back, because we're not picking up tomatoes.
Yeah, other
not
people have
refrigerated.
said that. Man, it's, you take a load full of ball bearings or something out to California, but what are you gonna bring back that's not refrigerated?
Yeah, that's why the truckload guys tend to have refrigerated, temperature-controlled equipment,
Yeah.
because they can do two-way trips.
Load up with lettuce or whatever.
So to get those back, we worked a deal. A lot of it moves out there on the rail, from Kansas City, Chicago, and Dallas, major railheads to the west. And we could use their trailers, which was fabulous. I spent about a third of my career in operations, and I ran one of our distribution centers in Salt Lake City, and I had the Great Basin. I had 13 terminals reporting to me around the Great Basin. The majority of my freight came to me on the rail.
So this is what they call intermodal?
Yeah.
They put it on they actually load the trailer on a big crane, then they go to there's one here in Kansas City. Hunt has one somewhere north of the river.
Yeah.
And then they load them up on usually like two to a flatbed train car.
These aren't the kind that you stack on top of each other. They're
wheeled.
trailers are wheeled.
They're wheeled already.
Yeah, and they have like big pickers that pick them up and set them on the car.
And they get two on a flatbed rail car.
Mm-hmm.
And then the train takes it wherever.
Right.
And then it unloads, and then the tractor backs up, and away you go to the destination.
Yeah, your local guys go out to the rail yard, pick them up and bring them back, empty them, and transfer them into your equipment, and take the empty back to the railroad and say, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Of course, the railroad stopped doing that about 10 years ago. They said, no, you're not using our trailers anymore. We're out of that business.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, you can't really, I never understood why they did it for free.
Why they did it, yeah.
It wasn't for free. I'm sure it was built into their rates.
Yeah, but they wanted the business.
Yeah, but their business has gotten awfully good. I mean, back when the Bracken oil fields were going up in North Dakota, they just forgot about all their customers, be it us, be it UPS. It's like, no, this oil stuff's paid a lot more money. And they slowed us down to where 3 days became 7.
Really?
And you talked a little bit about customers have this window of time they want the delivery. Yeah, there's just in time is a huge issue.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you've got one of your major methods of moving your freight slowed down.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
They fixed all that. They built double lines up there. That was BNSF up north.
Yeah.
You know, the railroad's a pretty good deal when Warren Buffett buys a railroad.
Yeah.
And he bought BNSF, 5-6 years ago?
Yeah, he's not an idiot.
Not at all.
So back to trucking. So you'd make a sale to underwear.
No, well, yeah. Or Snap-on Tools was in that town. There was a locally owned manufacturer, biggest manufacturer, aftermarket pistons, aluminum aftermarket pistons. I'm just thinking of who my customers were. We had J.C. Penney's, we had a big Kmart distribution.
Yeah.
So big inbound accounts, outbound accounts. So we go in and sit down. We figured that we're matching up, and I'd say, I need to understand specifically and in detail what you ship.
Yeah.
With what frequency and to what points. So we'd gather all that data. That would then be input into the computer, the old green screens.
Yeah.
And then pricing analysts would look at all that and start making decisions on the optimal price.
So you didn't sort of quote them a price.
Oh, no.
You were just trying to understand what their shipping needs were.
I would gather the data for an analyst, more of a financial guy, to determine what we would be able to offer.
So as a sales rep, how'd you get paid? On commission? Or?
Oh, no. We just got paid salaries.
Okay.
That changed over time. But it's still pretty much...
It was like base salary plus...
No, it was just salary.
How did it change over time?
Well, what happened is when it was like the early 90s, we had a guy come to us named Maury Myers who had, it's when George Powell III left he was the third, he was the grandson of Junior. The last Powell. He's busy writing a book about this right now too.
Really?
You might get hold of him. He
Really?
doesn't live far from here.
Really?
Yeah, he's still in Kansas.
George Powell III?
George Powell III. He's a good man, but it was the mid-90s. We're in a little economic downturn, and we've been making money hand over fist, even with deregulation. Trucking companies were still making
Yeah.
potload of money, but we had an economic
If
downturn.
they've adjusted to the new reality, because a lot of them just didn't survive.
Yeah, well, yeah, you look at all these, from the
Pacific
time my
Intermountain
career started,
Express.
you see these lists of the top 100 carriers in 1960, and now there
Yeah.
are 2 of them left.
Yeah,
Yeah, they either got acquired or they just can't do it.
couldn't do it, yeah. So kudos to Yellow for, surviving that big transition.
And prospered,
Yeah,
making lots of money, but then we had that little bump and the board hired Maury to come in, and he had, and it's not like we were in the kind of financial straits we were in 2008, nowhere near, but still, it was tenuous times. And Maury came in and looked at this thing, and he was a finance guy, and he had just been in Phoenix and had sort of rescued US Air as their CEO. Came to us, spent a couple of years, then he went to Waste Management and did the same thing for them. And now he's in Hawaii, enjoying life. And that's a place in Sausalito. In a vineyard in Napa.
yeah.
Maury did all right, but thank you, Maury, because he earned every penny he had.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things he looked at, and I sat in a meeting with him, because I was by that time at a level where I was working for a guy who worked for the president, running this Great Basin. And Maury came to us and sat on the meeting in Scottsdale, where my boss was, and there were 6 of us there, my peers and these guys. And Maury said, "You know the problem with you trucking guys?" He goes, "You got deregulated 15 years ago, and you're still acting like you're regulated. You're still acting like operations is everything,
Yeah,
and that customers are just going to put freight on your trucks because they love the way your trucks look." He said, "What you got to start thinking about is the market will always win."
yeah,
He said, and you've done a pretty good job with your sales and marketing, but you could do better if you pay these people differently. And so they worked into a structure, and I was involved in that. We worked with Towers Perrin, which was they're still around. They're no longer Towers Perrin, they're Towers something else.
yeah.
But pretty much compensation specialists. And we, about, I think, a couple dozen of us, 18 of us, would fly to Chicago every one day in a week and sit down for the day, and Towers Perrin would show us all this stuff, and then they'd ask for input, and we'd give them the input. And then we'd all go back to work. And then 2 weeks later, we'd come back to Chicago and do the same thing. Went through that for several months, and it ended up being a thing we called pay for performance. Go figure. People that produce more get more.
Get more.
Yeah, and all of a sudden,
What a concept.
and those that didn't make PFP, well, it's pretty much helps you cull the herd, doesn't it? You may be in the wrong job here at Yellow Freight, and you might want to be a dock supervisor rather than a sales guy. I often say, and I looked at that, you could make a good sales guy and was probably making 60 grand a year back in the mid 90s, and they could make another 40. I mean, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
In fact, I look back on it.
I mean, if they just sort of tried, if it was like really worked at it, you could make a lot of money.
Oh, if you just went out and did your job. I told people, people would ask, what's the best job you ever had? And said, being a sales rep in Reno. And if we had PFP when I was sales rep in Reno, I never would have taken that first management job. I would have stayed right there making all this money.
Yeah.
When I put together a group to sell to third-party logistics firms, that's a third of the industry now. Intermediaries take care of the supply chain management for a lot of the business in this country.
So there's firms that just specialize in logistics, how to get something from point A to point B.
Transportation intermediaries are called.
Yeah.
But they do it with data, and they do it with negotiations, they do it with understanding of their relationships with the carriers. They bring a lot of value to the marketplace, especially small to medium-sized business.
Yeah.
But, excuse me, the largest corporations, all the Fortune 500 people, while they still have logistics firms, departments, most of them, those logistics departments hire third-party intermediaries for their expertise and their ability to really use the power of data. So yeah, that's how the pay got changed for sales, and then we brought it over into operations. It wasn't anywhere near as rich as what the sales was, but still, the salespeople had probably too large a percentage of their pay in salary, as Tara's parent would tell us. The more you take away, as far as the base, and the richer you make, you'll get better returns.
Yeah.
But we never really had consensus on ever doing that, even though I advocated for it. I ended up as a senior VP of sales, so, but I didn't do it. You know, it was, all right, we're gonna whack your pay by $30,000 a year, but we're gonna give you the opportunity to make 70 more.
Make some more, yeah. Still a tough sale, so to speak.
It is, because that isn't what people signed on for, and you'd have to turn over your whole sales force.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
Yeah. Speaking of which, in that industry, do a lot of people, they get in the industry and they spend pretty much their entire careers in the industry?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Because it is interesting.
Very stable.
It's real stable.
Industry.
It's very unique skill set, trucking. And it sort of gets in your blood, but you're right. It's like you go to meetings and people will sit down, and I was, with my 30 years, it's like most of the guys I know are going to have 40 to 50 years in before they retire, because they came right out of college and started doing it.
Got into trucking.
Yeah, management training.
Yeah. Do you think that's changed recently with, you mentioned the guy that said you're still focused on operations rather than other aspects of the industry. You think that's changed overall, that you get people now that
The only
didn't really sort of, didn't come fresh out of college into trucking. They came in through other ways.
In different specialties, like the one area in our business that there isn't that long tenured situation is the IT people.
Yeah.
You know,
It's just
because their skill set is portable to any industry.
Yeah. Doesn't matter what you're shipping. It's just.
It doesn't matter what you're making, what you're shipping, what you're selling, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They can handle this technology, and they can go do that anywhere.
Yeah.
But no, I hadn't seen any major changes in it. Even the finance people, the marketing people,
Really?
not a lot of movement. Not in our company.
And are there like trucking families? Like, are there family? You mentioned George Powell III, but I mean, are there around the country? Are there families that sort of? Well, my dad trucked, and my uncle trucked, and by golly, I trucked too.
A lot of our drivers are like that.
Yeah.
And there are 32,000 employees in this company. The majority of them are drivers and dock workers.
Yeah.
I think 6,000 or 7,000 are in supporting roles, because the real work is moving the freight around.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of multi-generational employees in the transportation industry, and mainly drivers, but it's also like I've got a lot of friends whose children are in the business now.
Yeah.
But most of them haven't gone into the asset side, they've gone into the non-asset 3PL side.
Yeah.
If they're looking at sales.
Yeah. What about the transportation? What about the highway network over the 30 years of your career? I mean, you saw 85. I'm trying to remember. I mean, they were still kind of building out the interstate highway system in '85, weren't they?
I think it was pretty well done. I think in the 70s they were still plugging away on some of it in California. I don't know what's going on out here.
Yeah.
But really,
by '85 it was pretty well complete.
For us, because you think
they were still working on ring roads and stuff, but
but I-80 was laid, 70 was down, 40 was down, 90 was down. That's how we went east and west.
Yeah.
55, 35, 15, 5.
So the interstate highway system was really your.
Every major DC was close to an interstate.
Yeah. I just over the weekend I drove out to Phoenix and.
Take 66?
Well, not really.
I know. Used to be the way.
I took the 66 corridor.
There you go.
To Holbrook. But
couldn't help it.
I couldn't help but notice that just one person's observation, road quality has really declined. I mean, there are a lot of bad roads out there now. Was that a problem? I mean, how did you work?
That's become a huge problem in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, there used to be road maintenance. There used to be a Congress that would apportion money for a transportation bill.
Yeah.
And for a decade that wasn't done. It was all stopgap stuff.
Well, even to this, to this John Q. public, it's noticeable how poor the roads are.
Exactly, and trucking companies we're willing to pay, we know that we put more stress on the roads than cars.
Yeah.
Happy to pay our way with that. The American Transportation Association has been in Washington saying, raise the federal tax, happy to pay it.
Yeah.
Fix these roads.
Yeah. I thought that was part of Trump's campaign. I don't want to get into politics, but wasn't Trump talking about infrastructure?
Yes, and he talked about $1 trillion.
Yeah.
And there was a chunk of money in this omnibus bill where he said, I'll never sign another one of those, but we got money for the military, we got money for infrastructure.
Yeah.
But it's important and to have, it's just these stopgap things have been the problem because nobody can lay out a plan. You can't just go out and in a year do this. There's got to be some continuity. You have to have continuity. You've got to be able to plan for it.
I never thought about it this way, but like for the railroads, they own the road.
They own their right of way and their roads.
Whereas for trucking, you're reliant upon not the kindness of strangers.
We rent the road.
You're reliant upon the government, federal and state.
Mm-hmm.
Probably in your case, mainly federal government. It was, what was it, 90 cents federal, 10 cents
on the gas,
on just building and maintaining. But
yeah. It has been 90% federal, 10% state.
Yeah.
And the conversation though has to be with every state.
But you're reliant upon the government to provide the roadways for you, for your industry.
Mm-hmm. Now there has been some privatization in that area around the country. I'm trying to. They had toll roads not built by the state in the east back in the day. I know there was a north-south corridor, I believe, in Denver that people pay to drive on it.
But it's not a state toll road.
No, I think it's
a private.
I think that's
private toll
yeah.
road.
Yeah, you'd have to go to a library and you could look up those facts. Fact check me.
I wasn't aware of that there were some private roads.
There are some private roads, and there's a movement to do that, but that's never going to get off the ground.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, there's just
Well,
I don't see that as a way you could sort of revitalize the whole.
Well, the trucking companies couldn't afford to do it, but that isn't how this thing was financed. As far as I know, in Colorado, it was that I-25, I think, goes up and down, right, north and south.
Yeah.
And there's huge commuter. Well, they just said, we'll build a road if you want to pay us to drive on it, and people pay to drive on it. The people over here in all the traffic congestion go, well, why do the rich people get to?
Yeah.
So there's always going to be
But
socioeconomic.
Right, but I mean, that seems kind of similar where transportation is going. If you want to,
if you could,
you want to board at the first group in the airline, you got to pay.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if you want to have your own little private jet, you really have to pay.
Yeah. So that's nothing new there.
So the industry spends a lot of money on advocacy through the American Trucking Association and the state trucking associations. Every state has a very, very active transportation association. I think that's me making noise.
That's okay. You want to,
no.
We'll just edit it out.
I didn't want it to stop making noise. So let me just do that right now. There we go. No, I don't even care about my phone anymore. I'll see. It's like I probably sent you one. Hey, I'm sorry I was a couple days late, but I just don't get to email too often.
Must be nice to be retired.
Oh, I'm telling you. Leaving a job where there was 250 to 300 emails a day.
Yeah.
And nonstop conference calls and meetings.
Yeah.
But this is about...
You seem to be enjoying it, huh?
I love it. Yeah.
So let me ask you another question. It's just about trucking in general. Are self-driving trucks going to happen anytime soon?
I would say not anytime soon. This is just my opinion. I think that it'd be great if we had them. But let's go back to the conversation about the infrastructure. If you're going to have autonomous trucks, you better have lanes just for autonomous trucks.
Yeah.
Because the greatest problem on the highways are distracted drivers. We all know that, right?
Right.
Well, our drivers know it better than anybody because they sit up high.
Yeah.
And they tell stories that are horrifying of what they see.
What they see, yeah. And you can see YouTube videos of the idiotic stuff that people do around
Reading
trucks.
books, texting.
Right.
But I think that for that to work, it'd have to be sort of like the Jetsons, right? Where there's little lanes for things to go in. That way, it'd almost have to be like the transit authority things, like the BART
Yeah.
in the Bay Area, where you have your own road.
Yeah.
I
And there's
think
been some
that
talk, I remember there was some talk about, kind of rebuild I-70 for the trucks and put another limited access road for the passenger, for the,
something like that would work.
yeah.
Yeah. But we're going to, the industry, if there's one critical issue for the trucking industry right now, not enough people want to be truck drivers.
Really?
Oh, it's huge. It's going to start impacting our economy.
Really?
There are estimates anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 today. Drivers needed.
Need for drivers.
That's that capacity that those manufacturers and those retailers and those supply chain management people need. They need capacity and trucks rolling.
Yeah.
And we get to times where when you're in peak season down in the port of Los Angeles with all the holiday stuff coming in, right?
Yeah.
All the toys and things.
I mean, you just need a truck.
There aren't enough trucks. There aren't enough trucks, and then there aren't enough drivers. So if you can find the trailers, you fill them up, and then you have to explain, sorry, Mr. Retailer, but I didn't have enough drivers. What do you mean? Well, I don't have enough drivers.
Yeah.
And a truck driver working for the likes of YRC Freight can make an easy $70,000-$80,000 a year. That's a good middle-class American job that we hear about all the time. No good middle-class American jobs. There's one.
They're begging, huh?
There's a good 100,000 of them. And it's going to have an impact on the cost of freight too,
Yeah.
because the guys that are driving trucks want more money and they're getting it left and right.
Yeah.
Not so much with the unionized carriers. They get it by 3-year contracts.
Yeah.
But the truckload guys, they have 150, 200% turnover in drivers because people will steal them from them. You're robbing where can I find some drivers? Well, they have them over there. I'll go take them away.
Yeah. I interviewed one guy who said that they'll recruit at truck stops.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
people will just, drivers will just walk away from,
They call it drop the keys.
Yeah.
They do. They just walk away from their load.
Yeah.
Sometimes they call and let you know it. Sometimes
they don't. And then you got to have a team of drivers that actually, they go out, they're like a SWAT team or something. You fly them out to Denver and you go up and you retrieve that truck. They're sitting there because the driver walked away.
Yeah, I have no experience with all that. I've heard about it, but we don't have it.
Yeah.
With all our drivers being Teamsters and long-term employees,
They're
but the
committed.
average age in trucking guys behind the wheel is about 55
Really?
plus.
Really?
Plus. And the days of their children, their sons and daughters, and there haven't been a lot of daughters, it's been a male-dominated business.
Still to this
No. It started to change because our culture has changed, but most importantly, the trucks have gotten a lot easier to drive.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Yeah.
So you can get, a guy like me could even go drive a truck now.
I saw a truck, this is a little off topic, but so driving back from Phoenix on Saturday and Sunday, I saw a truck, I swear, it was almost like a mobile home. The cab was probably twice as long as this room. I don't know what he had back there. He must have had like a kitchenette and I don't know what,
Was it an owner-operator, or did it have a company name on it?
I didn't notice. I wouldn't be surprised if it was an owner, if it were an owner-operator, but I've never seen a truck with such a long
usually
tractor to it.
There's usually enough room for a bed.
Yeah, but this one
About
was
this wide.
Yeah, but
like
this one was clearly something else was going on there. I don't think I was living like he never had to go home because his home was with him. I think.
It might be what it is. That's a little. I don't know much about that. We had sleepers.
Yeah, you were always pretty much in the sales side of.
No, I was in operations. I wasn't in the truckload business where you had guys that went out on the road and lived in their trucks.
Yeah.
We had sleeper teams that ran out of Chicago, Kansas City to go across.
Right.
With expedited freight, but they just had a bed. one guy drove, one guy slept.
Yeah.
They didn't
Tried
have
to
the
sleep.
kitchenette in the back.
Right,
So
yeah.
I'm just saying, I wouldn't know equipment beyond, our equipment was very nice, but it wasn't lavish like you've just described.
Yeah. So your business was more, if I were driving for Yellow Freight, I'd be driving pretty much the same route.
Mhm.
And it might be, up to, let's say, from KC to St. Louis and back or something, or, so you'd spend every night in your bed, your own bed, and get up and do it again, kind of deal? Yeah.
Yeah,
And you sort of set up your distribution points
so
so that
you can make it,
you really minimized overnights and
you try to keep them about the mile, you're exactly right, where you can. And it's easy where there's heavy population density.
yeah,
Obviously, you stretch that a little bit when you get to what we call the flyover states that we live in.
Montana.
In Montana, no DCs in Montana.
Yeah.
And we would run, so you'd have, here's what you have with the road guys. You have, everything's done by seniority, data hire. And you bid once a year. It's a typical cycle to bid your work. It's this big process you go through. And it's good. I mean, so number one guy comes in and he says, and I have to relate to Salt Lake because that's where I had 125 guys on my road board.
Yeah.
And the number one guy comes in and says, I'm taking Butte because it's a lay down and it's max miles.
Because it's what? It's
A lay down. You put me to bed.
I see.
And the company pays
A
for it.
lay down.
A lay down.
A lay down.
You
Okay.
put me in bed. So we have contracts with hotels.
So he says, I want Butte, from Salt Lake to Butte, because
I
I'll
get-
drive there today, you'll put me up overnight. Kind of like
I'll drive there at night, you'll put me up during the day, then I'll drive back at night.
back at
That's how it works.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's getting the inbound to them,
yeah.
they break it, deliver it. make
Did
everything.
you push night travel? Does Yellow push night travel?
Well, it's just the nature of the beast. You don't push it. It's a natural flow because your customers work during the day. So
Yeah,
they
so they won't
want
have that load there at 8 a.m. or
they
7
want their
a.m.
load in the morning,
Yeah,
and then they're going to give you the outbound in the afternoon.
right.
So you've got to get it back, consolidate it, and get the drivers rolling. So the next morning they
So
have their
most of
morning
your-
in the freight.
Yeah, so most of your drivers are driving at night.
Yes, that are doing over the road.
Yeah,
With the exception of the team guys that are driving from Chicago to Seattle.
right,
They're driving day and night.
right.
And then so you have that. You have the guy, so this number one guy says, I'm taking Butte. And sometimes if we would bid October and April. So in October, he'd bid Las Vegas, number one guy. Think of the weather, right?
Right, better weather.
Then in April, he'd bid Butte. He's still got the miles, because
Yeah.
the road drivers get paid by the mile, not by the hour.
Right,
That's why they drive very safely. They're responsible drivers, they're well-trained drivers. I was always proud to work with a Teamster operation because they're literally the best in the business.
yeah.
But
So also, not a lot of traffic backups between Salt Lake and Butte, I'm guessing.
no, none.
Yeah,
Well, sometimes the snow plow's going slow.
right.
But when you pay by the mile, the guy's going to want to get there just for his own. He's only got so many hours because hours of service to get it done, but he's not going to push it and exceed the speed limit and do all those things. Plus, we had their equipment so they can't exceed the speed limit.
Right.
It was, then you'd have guys that would get these quick turns, like Salt Lake to Rock Springs and back, do it in a day.
Right.
Then you'd have guys that were on your extra board, whatever you needed, you call them and say, I got this run for you, I've got 2 Buttes today, so I need another guy to go to Butte, that kind of thing. But
You pay them a little bit better if they're kind of on call or they're there.
No, everything's contractual, they all get paid exactly the same, after the first 8
So it's more of a
years.
seniority thing if you're.
It's all about a seniority thing, yeah. So you then have your city drivers that do work during the day, and that's the pickup and delivery guys. They
Right.
take the freight out and deliver it. They get paid by the hour.
Yeah,
They get paid differently
okay.
than
So you got a distribution point here in KC somewhere?
Major distribution center just down the road here, where 70 and 435 come together.
Oh,
Major
yeah.
highways. You see it up on the hills.
Yeah, I used to live in the KC area. Yeah. Wasn't there like a drive-in movie theater?
Yes,
there
it's
too?
right adjacent.
Is it still there?
It is.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, when I was senior VP of sales at marketing, I called my marketing VP in and said, you know that big, ugly drive-in theater? I didn't know this is what it was. That's what it was. It's sitting right by our property. It looks like it's us, and it's just horrendous. It hasn't been maintained in 30 years. I said,
They still showing movies in there?
no, it's closed.
Oh.
I'm just saying, this huge sign is still sitting there,
Right, right.
unused, and it looks like we own it, and a bunch of people care about your image.
Yeah.
And I said, go find out who owns that thing, ask him, can we buy it? Would he let us paint it?
Yeah.
Nah, it never happened.
Never happened. Huh?
No, they wouldn't even talk to us. But yeah, there's DCs, we've got 26 of them around the country.
26.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they
Major metropolitan areas, because then you're
not always.
really.
Pretty much, well, they are, but you don't want to be right in the middle of the
Right.
all the people.
Yeah.
So we're in Maybrook, New York, not
Yeah.
Not
So
New
you want
York
to be out
City.
there where the transportation makes sense. But
you want to be out there where you're close to a big highway and,
Yeah.
and try to skirt around
yeah.
traffic.
So you got these loads coming in, and then your in town guys are taking it around to different manufacturers, retail places, and
Delivering it.
delivering it during the day.
You see us all day long, every day.
Yeah.
All us being all trucking companies. They're
Yeah.
out there. And what's really developed over the last 5 years is this home delivery. What do you think's driven that?
Oh yeah.
These
You're
things.
you're involved in that?
Yeah, no, we don't want to be, and because it's the cost model isn't set up to do it.
Yeah.
The cost model's B2B, dock to dock.
Yeah.
But so much of, as you see retail stores closing and everybody
Yeah.
buying everything on a computer,
Yeah.
you've got to find a way to crack code. So we are involved in that. There isn't a trucking company that isn't involved in it, some in bigger ways than others.
Yeah.
And then those that are really involved in it, like UPS and FedEx
Yeah.
Express, I mean, they get around the holiday season, they don't even have the capacity. You can't take that kind of peak
Yeah.
in demand against
Right.
your capacity to where Bezos said, well, I'll just build my own airline.
Right. Right.
And he's got the money to do it. So,
Or he's experimenting with drone delivery, isn't he? And so,
well, they talk about it. I think that's,
you don't think that's going to happen?
well, anything's possible. I would have,
Just, I've often wondered again. I don't see how that's sustainable. That I mean, it's great as a consumer, man. I get online, I order something, and 2 days later, if I want to pay for overnight, I can get it overnight. But if I just sort of am a user, 2 days later, it shows up on my doorstep.
I know. I don't think it's going away.
From a consumer standpoint, it doesn't get much better than that.
Exactly.
You know?
And if you live in a big metro area, you get same day.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think it's going away. I think everyone's working.
But it seemed to me that the logistics of in-town delivery, even for like YRC, I mean, that's massively complex, but also vital to the health of the organization. Is how efficiently can you get that stuff out?
Yeah, and we've always done it. I mean, it used to be not every commodity in the world, but I remember we had when I was running the West Coast sales and I was up in Portland, we had a customer that made these big playground sets you see in everybody's backyard.
Yeah.
The big wooden things with the
Yeah.
plastic slides.
Yeah.
And we'd have to take those and deliver them to people's houses. And I'd get, my phone would ring about it. What are we doing carrying this stuff? So I'm charging this guy out the nose for this.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
It's just a
It's
pain.
eating up, number one, there's no density to it.
Right.
And so it's horrible on the line haul and it's horrible in the transfer of the dock.
And you're delivering it to people that aren't used to receiving freight.
Exactly. Aren't home.
You got soccer mom out there, you know.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully the driver doesn't just show up, but you'd call all those people before you deliver. You wouldn't.
Yeah.
You wouldn't.
And I suppose in a way the era of this thing is helping you out a little bit. So you say, okay, you know,
Exactly.
it's on the truck. We're going to be there.
Exactly, but the biggest expense to the pickup and delivery operation is your routes are all in and out of industrialized areas, And then, let's go down to
go.
South Leawood,
Let's
go
go.
through,
Let's go to
and drop off
Greenwood.
this.
Let's go to Greenwood and deliver something.
Exactly. But it's not going away, and people are working, including the companies that I've worked for, to crack the code on how do we solve that.
Yeah.
And how do we solve it together? And there's great collaboration going on between the retailers and the carriers. Like there are some of our bigger retailers, people like to talk about not being great partners. They are great partners.
Yeah.
To their benefit. I mean, that's what partnership's about, right?
Right.
You win, I win.
Right.
So we have to do this thing together and find some middle ground.
But it seems like we're in a fundamental shift here where, I've talked to some banker friends that said, these we went through the era where putting up branch banks was the thing to do. Now they're killing them because nobody's going to those branches anymore. They're doing all their banking online.
Well, and some banks don't want people coming in.
I know. So, it's almost like retail is in a fundamental shift here where they're not going to go to the store. They're going to want to deliver it to the door.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's not going away.
No matter what, and I can't, but even like, Walmart's doing this deal where I guess you buy online and then you go and pick it up at one of their big box stores. And
They have parking.
they have specialized parking for you now.
Mm-hmm.
Target's doing it too. And, while you're waiting, I guess they've got like a Barca lounger there. You can
Really?
sit there, yeah. So,
I still go
and
to,
Uber Eats, I've never used Uber Eats, but you're paying somebody to go pick up your food for you and deliver it.
I've heard about that in like McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
So how do the economics of that work?
I don't
You
know.
buy a $4 sandwich and an Uber guy picks it up and brings it to you.
Yeah.
Now it's what, a $20 sandwich?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never used that service, but
No,
in a way, it's no different than it was in the 1920s. You got to get product from point A to point B,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to use some kind of a transportation system, and you got to have companies that are doing it. It's just a different mix, but in a way, if you squint, it's not any different than it was 100 years ago.
No.
It's still about that. The other question, you mentioned something a while back that just, it's not, the Rust Belt is sort of exaggerated. There's still a lot of product being made in the Midwest, broadly defined Midwest. And yet our population centers are on both coasts.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't the manufacturers adjust over time to that and get their manufacturing closer to where the customers are?
Well, now that's a great question, and you've seen a sort of an ebb and flow of the thought process behind that over time. Not only with the manufacturing, but with distribution. So for a while, everybody said, I need a massive single plant for
Right.
a cost efficiency and process efficiency, and I can afford the transportation.
Right.
And it's like, now that's if, it's all based on price of goods too. I
Yeah.
think I mentioned earlier, if you're making plastic or styrofoam,
Right.
you've got to get close. So you
Right.
have all these little plants.
Right.
But if you're in distribution, it got to be where people were saying, we need to put our distribution centers at key points all around the country. And then some started going back, no, I can do large distribution centers in the middle of the country, like Memphis,
Right.
where
Just
capacity shortage is unbelievable in Memphis because there's so much freight coming out of there.
Really.
And use load consolidation to move it into the markets I need to,
Right.
and then use the second carrier. I load full trailers, truckload guy,
Yeah.
drop it off with a regional LTL guy to
Yeah.
finish the delivery, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
So
you
there's
would-
kind of there's different philosophies. And
well,
different,
and I watched it,
different eras. maybe.
different eras, and some just stay with, look, this is where
Yeah.
our manufacturing plan is, this is where the skill set is, this is where the multi-generational employees come from,
Yeah.
to your point.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, I guess the way to think about it is you gotta know what your assets are and how you can leverage those assets
and what
for
you're,
the good of the market.
exactly, and what return on capital you get.
Yeah.
Is it really there to go, you're in Milwaukee and you've got some good market in Southern California, do you want to go build a plant in California?
Yeah.
And you have to look at the cost impact of that, and it would be phenomenal.
Deal with all that stuff, yeah.
Yeah. You don't see manufacturers moving around a lot. It's the software guys that,
Right.
the retailers that sort of
Right.
up and down, and they're all building like crazy now to be closer to population, to compete with this demand of give me it immediately.
Yeah. Another thing I can, so we're arranging broadly here, but
That's all right. Well, the guy will let it. You'll let
that's
it,
right. Another thing I can't understand is, like, in this day of streaming media, red boxes seem to be doing all right.
Oh yeah, I think about that when I see
So it's
them
like,
in the grocery store.
20 years ago, it was like, it's all going to be online. Anytime you want it, it's all going to be right there. And these red boxes start popping up where they seem to violate all the things that we think we know about the present to the future. So you got to go to this specific place, the red box. There's only a limited number of titles available, and copies too, because they're not manufactured when you press the button. And yet, but you can return them anywhere, so it's kind of like a library in that way, in regard. But they seem to be doing all right. In this era where, it's all online and it's delivered right to your screen and,
It'd be interesting to know what people would do that, because you're right. But now think about for the streaming. I pay a fee to HBO.
So maybe it's almost like a stratified thing where, okay, it's a certain demographic.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. But I see it I shop at Price Choppers. They have one there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And whenever I walk out, and I live in a pretty nice area of town, and so I see these families standing there getting a CD.
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't you just go to HBO On Demand or?
Yeah, I know.
Or
I use Redbox. I got kids, and I mean, there's just
you do use it.
I do.
So
yeah, because one of the things is, I don't know what's happened to advertising. There's another conversation, but there used to be some rules to advertising. Like this is pre-Viagra. This was pre-tampons. When I was growing up, you didn't ever saw an advertisement for feminine hygiene products.
Right. Ozzie and Harriet slept in separate beds.
That's so it's one thing I think for parents is all you're going to get on that DVD is previews. You're not going to get ads that you can't control.
Well, you can get Hulu and Netflix without ads.
Yeah. But you pay.
That's good though.
But you pay.
Well, then you just explained that to me, because I haven't. The last time we got a
and the other thing is
CD movie, it was in a Netflix envelope.
I haven't thought about that. I haven't thought about a lot about this, but sometimes when you got kids, limiting the options is a good thing.
Yeah.
Just to keep sanity in the household. So I don't know, but I think the whole thing is, so to come back to trucking is, the thing that I think about is every mode of transportation has what people call their affordances. So the example I use is, okay, we can bemoan the fact that we live in an automobile culture, but I was able to go from my hotel here, and I didn't have to transfer, I didn't have to, walk from a station of some sort. So that's the great thing, is like, you're driving down the highway and you see a fruit stand, you can stop, and hey, let's get some fruit. If you're in a train, you can't say, train, stop, I see a fruit stand off there in the distance. Mm-hmm. Well, wait till we get to the next station, then you get some fruit, And in a plane, you just see anything interesting down there. You can't stop. So every mode of transportation. So for trucking, the brilliant thing was, You can go from point A to point B in a truck, assuming you have the highway network.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the rail lines, because they own their roads, they didn't want to build a lot of roads because that was expense for them and maintenance and
Yeah, just spurs to their biggest customers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's the brilliant thing about trucking was that it suddenly made any place as a drop-off pickup point. Mm-hmm. Suburbs aside, I mean,
well, it was,
in theory, any place is a drop-off or pickup point.
And suburbs are.
Yeah.
They are, and they're more and more frequently, but a whole new segment of our industry is built up around that.
Yeah.
FedEx home delivery.
Yeah.
Where they take bigger shipments, and
yeah.
Thank goodness most of that stuff is done one little package at a time.
Yeah.
So you would think that this would help our USPS get profitable because they're doing work for UPS and FedEx.
Yeah.
And now Amazon.
And Amazon, yeah.
According to recent comments in the press, they're not charging them enough. I won't go any further.
Well, you know, two adults negotiate. The market takes care of itself.
Exactly.
Think, you know. So you know, so I don't know if I have a question behind this, but a lot of these trucking firms, including Yellow, started when the federal government got into the road building business in the 20s.
It got a lot more cost effective, I would imagine.
Yeah, because before then it was just like
the railroad and all the little railroad towns.
Yeah, exactly.
And the little local delivery trucks.
So once the
or wagons
didn't take people a long time to figure out. Oh, all of a sudden there's this network of roads. Then you got bus lines and you got truck lines. Start to emerge with federal investment in a national highway system.
You make a great point. I'd be very interested in looking into that because they called it the National Defense Highway System. That's how
that's how Ike sold it.
That's how he sold it, exactly.
He used the Ruskies as
a way to build a system for
national defense.
But for transportation of goods, transportation of people, be it in cars, buses.
Right. I mean, it revolutionized the vacation industry.
Yes.
And, an argument could be made that trucking benefited immensely from
without question.
the limited access,
I mean,
four-lane divided highway system.
I'm not old enough to remember running trucks on Highway 66 and Highway 40, but I remember riding as a passenger in the family station wagon back and forth across America once.
Yeah.
We left California and drove Highway 66. And then whatever the highway was, I think it was the Ohio Turnpike, the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Yeah.
I remember it as a little kid.
Yeah.
And then I don't know what my dad and mom did with the car, probably sold it and went to England for 3 years. Or they took it over there, I don't know.
Oh, so they actually drove to the East Coast and then flew over to...
No, on a boat.
Oh, really?
On a boat. On what was it was 1955, what was a military transport. When we came back, we flew, but we couldn't make it all the way to America. We had to stop in Greenland for gas.
Yeah.
And an old Constellation, the three-tailed guy.
Yeah.
TWA, we flew on TWA, remember that airline?
Yeah.
And then drove again, all the way back and went.
Bought a car or something?
He bought a car, had it waiting.
Yeah.
Waiting when we got to the port in New Jersey and drove across country.
Yeah.
With only 5 kids at that time. Ultimately, there were 7.
Really?
I know. They don't make station wagons big enough.
That's right.
But I think about those roads, and they were 2-lane. I remember that as a kid. I remember from Sacramento to San Francisco, it used to be like a 4-hour trip on Highway 40.
Yeah.
So to your point of that National Defense Highway being the industry and commerce's
limited access, 4 lanes.
4 lanes, let's go.
So,
I hadn't even thought about opening up tourism industry and hospitality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks for speaking with us. I don't want to keep you all night. It's
Oh, no.
about 7:15, so we've been talking for more than an hour.
No, I'm good.
So Yellow, it has its ups and downs, but it's survived for 100 years.
Yep, 1924 is when it began.
Yeah, so it's coming up on its 100th year.
Yeah, not too far away. Made a big deal about 90.
Yeah.
And it really is, if you read about the company and look what it's doing, it still has its challenges, but it's a challenging industry.
Yeah.
And I would say if there's any huge challenge right now, it's to get more people wanting to be truck drivers. And the company, as recruiters now, never had to have recruiters because a unionized company just didn't go to the truck stops and recruit people, but that's where they wanted to work.
Yeah.
Because it has a more stable life, as you even understood when you were asking questions. But if we don't get enough truck drivers, enough people to move things, then we will need autonomous vehicles. And I don't know. That's not my bailiwick. But I don't think it's like 5 years from now that's going to be going on in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, the cars themselves are having a little bit of a struggle because every time one of them gets run into by another car driven by a live driver texting, they blame the autonomous car.
Yeah, it's a public relations. I mean, they probably could prove that accidents per mile driven are much better with an autonomous vehicle.
Oh, without question.
Yeah.
It'd have to be.
I mean, sort of the downside to what we have now for a transportation system is you've got too many decision makers, basically, too many drivers.
That's a good way to put it.
For miles driven, I mean, you got everybody.
Now we're either going to need we're going to need more drivers, and we're going to need states to it's state by state regulation on what your length and weight can be. So when I was out in the West, we ran everything triples.
Yeah, I saw a triple this weekend.
Yeah, there you go.
Don't see those too often.
You don't see them out here because the states don't. It's not allowed.
I can't remember where I was where I saw that triple. It might have been New Mexico or Arizona. I think it was pretty far out there. Maybe it was
Yeah, New Mexico, Arizona,
Texas,
Nevada,
just Texas,
Utah.
Triples. I should have.
Sure.
I was just like, wow, there's a triple. Don't see those very often. I can't remember where I was.
Well, I know you can do it in Idaho and Montana. You can't do it in Wyoming.
Really?
One of the least populated states of all because the state wouldn't allow it. They tried. Now
Is it hard on the roads to be running a triple?
No, it's no harder on the road. It's probably less difficult on the road because it's.
I mean, the weight's elongated out.
Yeah, it's elongated.
What's the difference between two trucks going down right behind each other and a triple going down?
And think about the power units thing has got a bunch of weight, and you're going to have on average on one of those 20-foot trailers of what you put together to do triples. On average, if you're doing a great job of loading your trailers, you have 15,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And then you have to put some light with some heavy to keep the whole load to be within the weight limitations.
Yeah.
No, Wyoming it was I think these days are over, but it was back in the 90s when there was a big ballot issue in Wyoming, and the railroad had a lobbying group that they spent zillions of dollars in Wyoming convincing the 12 people that lived there that.
So that's still is sort of, I don't know, the relationship between the trucking industry and the railroad industry, is it still?
No, I think it's really good. It's very collaborative because the trucking companies, as we talked about earlier, are some of the biggest customers of the rail.
Yeah.
And
you sort of figured out, out west you'll see all kinds of coal trains, but you don't see truckers hauling coal.
No.
There's just the economics aren't there.
Yeah, those low cost commodities have to go in.
Low cost commodities, and there are only so many drop points. There are only so many coal fired generating plants. So it's not like,
but the rail is.
Soccer mom needs a couple ton of coal.
Exactly.
It's not going to happen.
But that intermodal is where their revenue streams are. In fact, the Union Pacific bought UPS Freight, right? Not UPS. Who did they buy?
But they bought one of the big.
They bought one of the big ones.
Yeah.
They didn't buy UPS. In fact, UPS Corp still owns UPS Freight. Who did they buy? But they bought somebody.
Yeah.
So there's a railroad buying a trucking company, and they had a asset light XPO Logistics by Conway.
Yeah,
You know, there's just, it's all
yeah,
becoming transportation solutions with
yeah, integration,
a lot of integration.
yeah.
But I don't think there's been a lot of railroads buying trucking companies, but what was that? I feel bad, I can't remember what the hell they bought,
right, yeah.
but it doesn't matter.
So you mentioned like, I-80, I-70, I-40, I-90, not so much probably.
Well, yeah, I-90 is not a lot of traffic because you use a lot of rail,
But in a way, those kind of major east-west.
east-west, and then the major
And
north-south.
north-south, I-35, it comes to mind.
I-5 is one
Yeah.
of the biggest corridors, get on
Yeah.
I-5 and.
But again, that whole thing started with, I mean, in a way, 66 was an outlier because 20, 30, 40 highway goes right, 40 highway around here somewhere, just a little bit north of here.
I would think a little bit south. 40.
Yeah, about a few miles south of here, right here in Kansas City.
Yeah, because
50 is a little bit south. But that was, again, the federal government setting up those, we want major intercontinental federal roads, transcontinental.
so the federal government did Route 66. Are you telling me?
Yeah, and they fought over that. Because to go from Chicago to LA, they kind of swoop down through Illinois and Missouri and then on west. That was atypical. Most of them started, in New York City and went to San Francisco, or started in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and went to LA. I mean, major from coast to coast, pretty much either due east-west or due north-south. And so 66 was an oddball in a way.
Oh, okay.
But it went from Chicago to LA. So from a trucking standpoint,
That would have been huge.
Major artery, yeah.
Yeah, without question. That's still one of the biggest, heaviest lanes of tonnage and shipment count.
I-40.
No,
From
LA, Chicago to LA.
Chicago
Yeah.
to LA,
And 40 is still huge, yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But still, getting product from Chicago to LA and back. Long Beach, probably realistically.
Nowadays.
LA,
There's still a lot of manufacturing down there. Amazes me they can afford to stay in that state, but
yeah. But you say to this day, Chicago and LA.
Chicago's still the biggest freight market. In fact, I got together with a couple guys about a month ago, and there's this young guy who's was the director of sales out in the Portland, Seattle area, and then he'd been in Chicago. Now he's here. And I was saying, Mark, you're following my path. That's exactly what I did. You gotta go through Chicago to be an executive with the company, because that's where all the freight is.
That's where the freight is, huh?
That's right.
Now what about up and down the coast? So I-5, 95.
Well, it's really a northbound thing on the west coast. There's a lot of freight going north. So the rates going up I-5 are gonna be a little more expensive, and you can get freight from the Oregon, Washington area back down to LA for pretty reasonable rates to
Really?
reposition equipment, absolutely. Yeah, because it's all, you said it, it's ports.
Yeah.
And there's still massive manufacturing. I mean, you fly into LA and you can see it, it's still there.
Yeah. I heard a story that the whole shipping container business got started because they had a hard time getting product up and down the East Coast. And so this guy developed a way, and that was back in the day where you'd put a pallet, the net, put it on a net. That,
Yeah.
And you,
Crane.
Yeah, and you're a crane, and you'd pay all these guys to load and unload those pallets full of stuff. And he came up with the container concept, and it just revolutionized the shipping industry. But that was all because of congestion on the East Coast. Couldn't get up and down the coast.
And before the 75 and 95.
Yeah.
See, and that sort of reverse flow there to the west coast. There's no freight coming out of Florida. Yeah, it's north to south.
Yeah.
North to south. And we use a lot of rail from Georgia into Florida
Yeah.
as an industry.
So it's an industry. It's, do you know enough about other nations trucking?
I have a son that lives in Australia, and I know they run freight trains in the outback.
Yeah.
That's about it.
They don't truck across Australia so much.
There's-
It's always
It's
trains.
like 2/3 of Australia is like the Mojave Desert.
Yeah.
So there's nothing going on out there. And they have trucking companies, and it looks just like us. I haven't taken the time. I go down there every year,
Yeah.
and for extended periods now that I'm retired. And I've often thought I should go find who, and I've looked it up, who are the major LTL guys in this country, because they run the same operations, or truckload guys or LTL guys. Give them a call and go have lunch with them or something.
Yeah.
And I go, no, I could spend time with my grandchildren. But I'm going to do that one of these days.
Yeah. But you think there's something about trucking that it doesn't matter whether you're talking Australia, US, Canada, Argentina, it's going to be kind of basically the same.
Oh, without question.
I remember when I studied for a semester in London, and the deal with England is it's an island. So you got a lot of people on an island, but you don't have you got to move a lot of product in. And those lorries would come out of, I don't know where they were, what was it, Felixstowe, I guess, some of those major ports where they were before the Channel.
Mm-hmm.
Man, those trucks would be, and there'd be endless trucks coming in to London from the southeast coast with
Like
product.
Southampton.
With product, yeah.
Yeah. No, we
So
have.
there's the vagaries of geography and population and stuff like that. But,
Yeah. No, we had an operation, a partnership with Franz Moss in Europe when we were trying to do some global stuff back in the 80s or the 90s. And their operation seemed a lot like ours,
yeah.
but they didn't seem to have the same fluid ability to go from country to country like we go from state to state.
Yeah.
Back in the days, I don't know the history of
I don't know if that's changed much.
EU. When was the EU?
I don't know. My lifetime, but
Yeah, mine too,
I
obviously.
I can't remember when, but
I did.
so you think Yellow's kind of said North America?
Yeah. In fact, James made it very clear when he got back.
Yeah.
He goes, I even hate worldwide. Turn this camera. He says it in public all the time. I hate the name worldwide. We're not worldwide. We're North American.
Oh, I see.
But the legal cost of changing that on all contracts and all that stuff, it's just almost impossible to get rid of a corporate name.
Yeah.
So, no, we're North
Really
American truckers
Focused on North America.
and trucking.
Yeah. Here's a new line of questioning that hasn't come up yet. Weather. So when they were first starting 66 and they were promoting it, it was like it's the southernmost route to the West Coast. So
That's how they promoted it.
yeah. So your chances of having winter weather interfere with your travel, whether it was a family in a car or any kind of travel, chances are better if you take 66 than you take any other route to the West Coast. So as you mentioned, the one trucker said, I'll take Vegas in the winter.
Right.
I'll take Montana in the summer.
Right.
Is that true in the entire industry? When you're trying to, how is weather that really much of a factor?
Oh, it's a huge factor.
Yeah.
The winter weather is a huge factor. The
Yeah.
cost of storms is unbelievable because, well, even back before weather predictions were as precise as they are now, you can't really make jokes too much about weathermen anymore because they pretty well get it because of the information they have.
Yeah, especially 48 hours out,
They can let you know what's going to happen. But we had a weatherman on staff.
Really?
Yeah. Well, under contract. He was like a local weather guy
But
at
just
some
for
TV
you.
station.
Just for you.
working under contract. I think he was a weather guy for a TV station on the West Coast somewhere.
Yeah.
but he was under
But
contract
he understood where to get the data he needed.
to and let our central dispatch know what's going on so they could do their diversion plans.
Yeah,
And right now, we run across 80, which is a huge run
Yeah.
into Northern California and
yeah,
Nevada and whatever, but when those storms are really pounding Donner Summit,
yeah.
if you've ever been over there in Reno.
I've never been over the Donner Pass, but
Donner.
they measure foot, they measure snow in the foot, not the inch.
Absolutely, that's how it comes down.
Yeah,
And it runs at the summit for 25 miles. I mean,
Oh, really?
you climb up out of Reno and you
And
get
you're-
up there on
you're
the
up
top
on
and
there,
you're up there high for a long time. Well, we just go ahead and start diverting stuff down to Southern California
yeah,
and then come back up I-5.
yeah.
And while the miles are money, it's still delayed freight is
It's
even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
You have a weather guy would tell you, you start to divert because you were
well, now we just use the Weather Channel. But we used to, you know what I'm saying? But we used to have the weather guy.
Yeah, and then you also have to make decision points like, okay, they're in Salt Lake. Should they go south or should they keep going west?
Precisely. But they usually do a pretty good job of making
You
those
sort of have your
plans.
decision points as you travel across the country. It's like, okay, where are we going north, south, straight down the middle?
And with the majority of our network, which is east of the Mississippi, where you really run into those problems is in New England.
Yeah,
You think about that.
yeah,
And the few times that there's any kind of weather event south of the Mason-Dixon line, you might as well figure it's gonna shut down because nobody's gonna do anything.
and it just snows.
that-
Everybody
that-
just stays home and
Yeah,
yeah.
but that's so rare, you know, that really impacts.
Now, what about the Great Lakes? Because I've heard horrendous horror stories about lake effect snow and how, you know, it's true for all transportation. I mean, they got to get around Lake Michigan. So that's one reason I think why Chicago's a rail hub is because it's a pinch point in a way. It's a continental pinch point for freight.
Oh, it is, it is.
And they got to get around Lake Michigan. Got to, you know, but when you get that lake effect snow, I talked to a guy. He was a salesman, different industry. He literally sat in his car on whatever that I-90, I-80 at the, you know, Gary, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
The snow was coming down, lake effect snow. He was there for like 2 days
Yeah, it happens.
at a dead stop.
That is, there's no diversion from that.
Right.
Like I said, we can get to California by going south. There's no diversion from Chicago to the northeast.
Right.
And you've got to go through, and that's,
And you're going along those Great Lakes, you know, and it can snow like the blazes in Buffalo, and it can snow in Cleveland, and
oh, and those are all big freight towns
yeah,
too.
I know.
And getting freight, but you just get shut down.
Yeah.
And
So
then
weather
it-
really is a
It's a huge cost.
yeah.
It costs millions whenever there's shutdowns, because you've got a fluid network that never stops, right? The only day that the company really lets everybody off is Christmas. Other than that, somebody's always working, driving,
Yeah.
getting premium pay for doing it, but it's in constant flow.
Yeah.
And when you shut it down and you get your equipment and your people in the wrong spots, think about what happens to airlines.
I was going to ask you that. I mean,
It's just like the airlines.
airlines get all the press when there's a weather event.
hmm
Flights canceled, you know. They never talk about trucking.
Well, the same thing's happening.
They never talk about Amtrak, you know. It's always about the airlines. But the other thing about, and I don't know the airline industry, but, you know, it's got that ripple effect. So you get thunderstorms in Chicago, even if you're not flying through Chicago, it affects where those planes are and when they're going to be wherever they need to be. I mean, it's very, very tight, sort of coordinated. So you get one little ripple anywhere in that system, and it affects basically the entire system. So you get delayed flying from Phoenix to Atlanta because of
Absolutely.
weather in Chicago, even if you're not going through Chicago.
Yeah, and it happens pretty fast because it's
Yeah.
a faster.
Is it the same in the trucking
It's
business?
the same
So
thing. It's a slower ripple.
If you get
But
a
if
you
you
know,
get
major
your-
weather event, it kind
Yeah.
of screws up the whole system.
Yes, yes. Because you get your equipment out of balance. It doesn't probably have the far-reaching. It has the effect is as far-reaching, but not as severe the further away you get. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Or with airlines, people are getting on a plane at Newark and they're flying to LAX.
Right.
Our freight's getting on the truck in Maybrook and it's just not getting to Chicago And Chicago's still getting its freight in from everywhere else, and that
Right.
continues to roll.
Right.
No, that's a good point. Weather is a huge impact.
It affects the whole system.
Well, and the cost to the carriers is unbelievable. Just moving snow off
Yeah.
your yards.
Oh, yeah.
I remember one winter when I was a DC manager, we had a January that in Utah, where it snows a lot every year, set like a dozen snowfall records in 3 weeks. And we spent $50,000 in those 3 weeks just having the guy come take snow off the yard
Just
so
snow
we
removal.
can keep,
Yeah.
just shoveling the snow. And for, adjust for inflation.
Yeah.
So yeah, weather can have a big impact on the industry.
What about, just in the 30 years that you were in trucking, just in terms of, I guess I'd call it the technology, with the trucks and their fuel efficiency and, load levels kept going up and up during those 30 years, I'm assuming.
No, the weight,
Weight didn't change?
no, because that's, again,
Regulated,
regulated.
state regulated.
Yeah. And,
But
but it,
did you see anything that you thought was like, this was a major, what they call a disruptive technology?
well, the first disruptive technology in the industry was the forklift. And we used to always joke about that was the last.
The motorized forklift.
The motorized forklift,
Yeah.
not the
Because,
two-wheeler, not the
because, no,
two-wheeler.
because then you could load a truck in minutes.
Mhm.
It's all palletized, and the forklift is driving right into the trailer, loading them up.
But really, the disruptor and the change agent is the hardware and the software to use data analytics to determine how you run your network,
Yeah.
how you load your trailers. It's just phenomenal, the cost savings you can get. I think you look at, and I'll talk about a competitor, Old Dominion. They've
Yeah.
really grown like crazy over the last few years, and they continue to provide this absolutely phenomenal service. And they're one of the first to use the big data to determine from the
They're
time
really
the
using-
shipment's called in,
Yeah.
we know exactly where it's gonna go
Yeah.
to get from point A to point B. There's never an A to B kind of thing. It's A to B to C to D,
Yeah.
E, F, G,
Right.
and then on down.
So
the
really
line.
it's almost like computer algorithms and the
Yes.
computing power, and assuming you have good data,
Mhm.
has really changed the industry.
It's changed the industry dramatically.
Yeah.
It's,
Because then it's not a human being saying, well, I think maybe the best way is to go here, and they can analyze it and say, I've heard anecdotally that, I don't know if it's UPS told its drivers, don't make any more left-hand turns.
they're city.
It's
That's
faster.
a fact.
It's faster. It seems counterintuitive to us. It's actually faster to make right-hand turns than to wait and go left
Mhm.
in a truck.
You still see them occasionally turn left, but yeah, I think they plan their routes because they stop at every single business.
Right.
Where an LTL carrier could go into the same area, it could cover 4 or 5 UPS routes, one driver.
Yeah.
Because the UPS, everybody gets the little small packages and everything. So, yeah, no, that's fact.
Yeah.
Right turn stuff. And there's, I know one of the things that our battle cry was on our CapEx was there's 2 things we need around here: more trucks and more technology.
Yeah.
And that's what the money's been spent on, is we've gotten
Yeah.
back to where we have money to buy things, road optimization, P&D pickup and delivery optimization,
Yeah.
line haul routing optimization. Worked with Princeton University back in the 80s and continue to work with them on our SysNet that helps us keep a flow and a view of the flow of the network.
Yeah. And you can sort of spot problems really early.
Quickly,
Yeah.
and they blast it for the network. Actually, there's a visual for the central dispatch guys,
Yeah.
because you can see that freight's backing up and everything. When the life is perfect around North America, it's all green.
Yeah.
And then you start looking, a little yellow starts popping up. Oh, that
Yeah.
Portland to Tracy is starting to back up.
Yeah.
Why haven't we got a driver in there? Why
Yeah.
aren't we
Yeah.
cutting that trailer? Well, it's not full yet. You have those things. You talked about partial trailers. That's death,
Yeah.
running partial trailers.
Yeah.
So,
So we do need to wrap up. It's 7:40.
I haven't heard them, but
Yeah,
they're
I'm
gonna come
surprised.
beat on the door.
Yeah. So here's another anecdote that I just, this is like a brave new world. But so I got the smartphone. I'm driving down I-40, coming back from Phoenix, and I'm into New Mexico, and I call up Google Maps, and I see there's a big red thing here, and I actually have a little accident symbol there.
Mm-hmm.
So I quickly looked. I said, "Is there a way around this?" And there really wasn't. I mean, that's the thing about the West is,
There's no side road.
there's no side roads. There's no plan B that you can really do. So I'm looking at it like there's just no way. So I knew I was getting in. Pretty much we came to a dead stop. It was an awful accident. By the time I got to the accident, it was like 3 trucks, and man, one of those trailers was I don't know what happened, but that thing was destroyed. I mean, there must have been a load all over the interstate. I hope nobody got killed, but man, it was a mess. But Google Maps was, I think they're just using cell phone enabled to tell you that these cell phones aren't moving very fast in these people's pockets. That must mean that the road is,
I think traffic reports are sent through because I have a built-in GPS in my car, and it has got XM radio.
Yeah.
And whenever I drive somewhere, that there's an accident ahead, it'll say 5 miles ahead, an accident. Do
Yeah.
you want to avoid?
Yeah.
And you go, yes, I do, and it gives you an alternate
It's a way
route.
to go. Yeah.
Which you couldn't do in the middle of the desert in New
Right.
Mexico, but you
Right.
can in Kansas City.
Just about anywhere. Yeah.
But I've always thought they get
But-
fed from the same database
I don't know how
that the traffic reporters.
I don't know how they're doing it, but it's amazingly accurate.
Well, I know in
When
Chicago
Google Maps says there's a problem, there's going to be a
there's
problem.
a problem, but they're getting it from the traffic stuff. Because when I lived in Chicago for 2 years, my office was 24 miles from where I lived, and we elected to live in the city. In fact, we elected to live very close to Wrigley Field, being a Cubs fan. And my wife put up with it. But I would set my office, we're over here on the north side of the city, and the terminal was down by 294, Tri-State, not up by 94,
Yeah.
but 294.
Yeah.
And I would watch this IDOT map.
Yeah.
And it would it would be red, 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 going 55 up to Lakeshore, because that was my route home, up
Right.
55 Lakeshore. And I would wait till it at least would start turning yellow before I'd leave the office, so I wouldn't leave till 6:30 or 7, but I figured I can sit here and work, or I can sit in the car and be frustrated.
Yeah.
But that was all fed by cameras up and down. You could also hit the cameras, and the cameras have seen
You could
that.
watch the cameras.
You
Yeah.
can watch it, but I assume they were getting that data fed in, and then that data goes to people like Google Maps.
I don't know how they're doing it, but it's amazingly accurate. The problem for freight is if the truck's not moving, there's nothing else for the driver to do.
He's just burning hours of service sitting there.
Yeah.
That's
So
the
you
problem.
want to keep the trucks rolling.
And the drivers want to keep rolling.
Yeah.
Because they run out of service, they have to go
Yeah.
down.
But so I swear this will be my last question.
Okay.
This has been a good conversation, but so in talking to some of the drivers from the 50s and 60s and 70s, there were the rules and then there was the reality. But now it seems like you can know, I'm assuming Yellow knows where every truck is, whether it's moving or not, what its rate of speed is, what direction it's headed, So you can't have a driver that decides that he's gonna sell his load to, go down to Guadalajara or something, and you know that once that truck gets off its route, something's wrong, So is that kind of pinpoint accuracy with data, real-time data, has that made the industry better?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that when the feds say, I think you can't drive more than 10 hours continuous, or whatever the rule is.
Well, yeah, 11 hours of service.
11 hours.
Yeah, with
That-
with breaks in
Now you
between.
can say, this driver has done that, and they gotta stay off now.
Well, and you know that the federal government put the mandatory requirement on trucking companies to have onboard recorders.
Yeah,
So that's very, very recent.
yeah.
That
So
the final deadline came, and the carriers are like, boy, that's millions of dollars to buy those, but I'll get that money back real fast because I'll know exactly where those trailers are. This
so
is
the
fairly
gap
new.
between the rules and the reality has kind
It's just come together.
of come together.
It's just come together. Now, a lot of companies did it on their own because they wanted to know exactly where it was to feed that information to their customers who are watching their supply chain.
Yeah,
We didn't have to do it because about every 8-10 hours, our trailers are checking in at some depot along the way.
right,
Trailer checks in, all the shipments check in, boom, everything's updated,
yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah,
I remember watching an IBM ad, and it was a guy sitting in the middle. This was several years ago when RFID was,
yeah,
everybody thought that was gonna be a big deal, it never happened.
yeah,
This guy's sitting in the middle of the road, and he stopped at a desk with a computer, and he stops the truck. You're going the wrong way. What do you mean I'm going the wrong way? The shipment's supposed to go that way. How would you know that? Because the shipment's talking to me. RFID.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's just, that's just gonna just continue to,
It'll get better and better all the time for
Yeah.
everybody and bring great efficiencies. It already has. Technology. We talked to Doug Wagner, who's the CEO of Echo Logistics up in Chicago, and they're one of the biggest 3PL firms. Doug's a brilliant guy. He was a city sales manager in Seattle for Yellow, and I was one in Salt Lake, and my first rate retrieval disc, 5 1/4 inch. Doug wrote it.
yeah,
So I asked Doug, how have you done so damn well in this? He goes, Bill, it's great sales process and technology and understanding data. That's all there is to it. And he's right. It's not real complex. It's real complex to get the data to where it can be productive for people.
yes,
And that's going on and evolving rapidly every day.
yeah,
It's unbelievable. Back when I was on the street selling, you could get freight for bringing a pizza in for lunch because nobody was paying attention to what those guys are doing on the dock.
yeah,
Now it's a big financial deal, and you can be a very small company and you can watch your freight budget on a
Right.
phone,
Right.
right?
right,
So the finance guys got involved in it, which is good. It's good for America, and it was better. I didn't like delivering pizzas. I liked having business conversations.
Well, thanks, Bill Crow. We've been speaking with Bill Crow, who is happily retired
Delighted to be retired.
from YRC Freight, a division of YRC Worldwide,
That's correct.
but really North America.
But really North America.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.